Welcome to The Explainer. We have all been there. That deep muscle ache that shows up a day after a tough workout. Today, we're going to get into the science of why that happens and how one surprising fruit might just hold the key to a much faster recovery.
So let's start with a feeling we all know, right? You absolutely crush your workout, you're feeling on top of the world, and then the next morning, you can barely roll out of bed. That pain, what we call delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS, is something pretty much anyone who trains has felt. But what's with the delay? Why doesn't it hurt right away?
Well, let's dive in, because what's actually happening inside your muscles is way more complex than you might think. It's not just one event, it's a powerful chain reaction.
Okay, so to really get a handle on recovery, we first have to understand the damage itself. And scientists have a name for this. It's called exercise-induced muscle damage, or EIMD for short.
EIMD is basically the official term for that classic post-workout soreness and weakness. But the fascinating thing is, the research shows it doesn't all happen at once. It really unfolds in two totally distinct acts.
Think about it like this. The workout itself, especially those tough lowering movements, creates tiny little earthquakes in your muscles. That's Act 1, the immediate primary damage. But the soreness, the pain you really feel, that comes from your body's emergency response team rushing to the scene. And that's Act 2, the secondary damage, which is all driven by inflammation.
This timeline explains that delay perfectly. You see, the actual mechanical damage happens right away while you're still in the gym. But that soreness you feel a day or two later, that's your body's secondary inflammatory response kicking into high gear. It's the cleanup crew that's actually causing most of the commotion.
And this is the key takeaway. The real bad guy for your recovery isn't the initial micro tear from the workout itself. It's that prolonged secondary inflammation that follows. So, that leads to a huge question. If we could get that secondary response under control, could we recover faster and feel a whole lot better?
So, if that secondary damage is the real enemy, how do we fight back? Well, a ton of research is pointing to a surprisingly simple and completely natural solution: tart cherries.
So what's the magic here? Well, it seems to be these amazing little compounds called anthocyanins. These are the natural pigments that give tart cherries that deep, vibrant red color. But it turns out they do a lot more than just look pretty.
And this is where it gets really elegant. It's almost like a perfect lock and keys situation. The two main things causing all that secondary damage, inflammation and oxidative stress, are precisely what the compounds in tart cherries are naturally equipped to fight.
So how do they actually do it? Well, on a molecular level, these anthocyanins go around and neutralize these damaging little waste products called free radicals. But they also put a damper on key inflammatory pathways in the body, specifically something called COX enzymes. And what's really wild is those are the exact same targets as common painkillers like aspirin.
Okay, so that's the theory, and it sounds great. But what happens when you actually put this to the test? You know, with real athletes pushing their bodies to the absolute limit? Well, the results are pretty remarkable.
Study after study has looked at this, testing everyone from college students doing bicep curls to elite marathon runners and cyclists. And the results all seem to point in the same direction. Drinking tart cherry juice seems to seriously take the edge off the symptoms of muscle damage.
For instance, check out this incredible study they did on runners in the London Marathon. Right after the race, both groups, the cherry juice group and the placebo group, had a similar drop in strength. But look at what happens next. The cherry juice group was back to full strength in just 48 hours. The placebo group, they were still significantly weaker.
And if you want some hard numbers, look at this. In another study, after a really tough workout, the placebo group lost strength, measured at about 22 units. But the group drinking tart cherry juice, their loss was only 4. That is a massive difference in protecting your muscle function.
So let's be super clear about what's going on here. The cherries don't stop that initial primary damage, and that's a good thing. You need that stress to signal your body to adapt and get stronger. What it does do is blunt that painful, recovery-slowing inflammatory aftermath. You get the good without so much of the bad.
So what does all this science mean for you and your next workout? I mean, how can you actually apply this stuff?
The bottom line is, the evidence really suggests that adding tart cherries to your routine, usually as a juice or a concentrate, can make a real, tangible difference. We're talking about a faster return to your peak strength, less of that crippling next-day soreness, and just an overall better recovery.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The scientific consensus, spelled out right here, is that daily consumption is a legitimate strategy that can help you bounce back faster from your workouts.
And for a final thought, let's end with a bit of scientific honesty that the researchers themselves brought up. They point out that it's pretty interesting that basically all the studies show a positive effect. Now, that could mean it's just a really powerful tool. But they also encourage more research just to be sure there isn't some kind of bias toward publishing only the positive results. And that's a great reminder that science is always an ongoing conversation.